what is then the mandate of UNHCR? What UNHCR does? First of all, UNHCR deals with protection of asylum seekers and refugees. In any conflict, some people, or in any circumstance, some people may be obliged to leave their country because they feel that their government cannot protect it, because of political opinion, because of religious affiliation, because of any other relevant reasons which would generate persecution against this individual. And this individual or a group of individuals would leave their territory and go and seek asylum in another country, seek the protection of another country. Refugees are outside their countries. Asylum seekers are outside their countries. Later on, through different resolutions of the General Assembly, UNHCR was also requested to deal with the situation of stateless individuals. This is very relevant in Central Asia. You may not know about it, but there are quite a number of stateless individuals in Central Asia, including in Kazakhstan. These are people who have no identity, no nationality, no documentation, or documentation which are expired. This is unfortunately a fact of life. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a certain period of time where people had to go and declare or get the nationality of a country or the other. And some didn't use this opportunity. These people exist in Central Asia. We just finished a very good work with the Turkmen government, and as a result of this joint work, we discovered that there were 13,000 individuals of 18 years and above in Turkmenistan that were not documented. They were stateless. So now, with the small population of Turkmenistan, so many people, and if you add their members of family who are below the age of 18, this number may be double, or up to 30,000. So we believe that this exists. And therefore, these people are not under the protection of any legal system because they have no identity, they have no personality per se. They exist physically, but they do not have judiciary or legal personality. And this is a very painful exercise, and this is a very, very painful reality. There are people who are in a stateless situation. They may have citizenship of a country, but they don't have documentation. Therefore, they cannot benefit from the rights of their citizenship. So this was added to the work of UNHCR. This work is not so much known because media, and you very rightly mentioned that media makes opinion, media are not focused on that. This is something which is a sort of dormant problem in some countries. And we have some great achievements in this regard. And the biggest achievement was to obtain citizenship for millions of Urdu speakers in Bangladesh, which are called normally the Biharis. And that was, millions of people finally obtained citizenship of their country in which they were living. And that citizenship was denied for nearly 40 years. Then these are the two core mandates of UNHCR, what we call it core mandate. Then in the course of time, conflicts repeated, the nature of conflicts changed, and there were probably at a certain period less movement of people outside, but rather more movement of people inside. And then the notion of internally displaced persons came. People who are displaced within the territory of their own country for a variety of reasons, their own conflict with their governments, ethnic clashes, whatsoever may be the reason. And then UNHCR was requested as a protection agency, as a protection of civilian agency, to deal with protection of internally displaced people too. Why you need an international body to deal with protection of people within their own territory? It's again on the capacity of the government. The government is not capable at a certain period of time to ensure the right protection for their own citizens, and therefore you need to have an international component, a support to the government to do this job. A very good example which is relevant to you is Kyrgyzstan last year. Based on the ethnic clashes that happened between the two communities in South Kyrgyzstan, nearly 300,000 were forced off their homes. They went to neighboring places, they went to families. And then the government, for a certain period of time, was not in a position to ensure that needed protection. And therefore, we came in and we said, okay, we will ensure protection by presence. We really multiplied the number of international staff in that conflict area in order to make sure that this would be a sort of dissuasive reasons to convince communities that they should stop quarreling with each other. Another extended mandate we have is the question of returnees. When refugees return home or displaced people return home, they find their houses burned, they find their properties confiscated, they find nothing. If I take the example of Afghanistan, you all may know that one of the terrible refugee situations was the refugee situation in Afghanistan. At a certain point, we have over 5 million Afghans refugees in Pakistan and some 3 million in Iran. So 8 or 10 million people return home. After 30 years, after 20 years, after 15 years, they don't find anything. So these people must be coached up to a certain period of time when the government is in a position to take charge of these people. And quite often, unfortunately, governments fail to do so. So therefore, UNHCR's mandate was extended to deal with these people too. Now, in the recent years, there are 2 other factors which have been added and then UNHCR is requested to deal with it. And the first thing is the mixed migratory flows. You all will have a simulation on that topic of migration. Migration has become too complicated because there are new phenomena which have been added since 1950s when the conventions were derived. Trafficking, human being trafficking, drug trafficking, weapon trafficking. This is now the modus operandi in the world. Terrorism is a fact of life, unfortunately. So what makes the mixed migratory flows more complicated is that victims and perpetrators use the same mechanisms, use the same routes. They are in the same plane. Probably they are in the same bus, crossing borders. So therefore, it is difficult to see from the eyes of individuals who is a victim and who is a perpetrator, or who may be a victim, who may be a perpetrator. Therefore, it has to be regulated properly. Countries have legitimate right to defend their national interests. Countries have legitimate rights to be concerned about their national security. But at the same time, the preservation of national security should happen within respect of internationally known standards. If someone needs protection, that person must be provided protection. So therefore, you see that it has become a challenge for authorities, for migration authorities, to distinguish who really needs protection when a massive number of people come to a border. Some of them may have bad intention. We faced it here, and we faced the challenge. And in other countries we are facing. That's why, you know, you have the phenomenon of terrorism, which is affecting quite a number of countries. So this has become a challenge, and therefore UNHCR was requested to advise governments how to manage mixed migration flows to make sure that countries pay full attention and do what is needed for their national security, but at the same time respect international norms and standards when it comes to protection of people who leave their countries for reasons of persecution. And finally, climate change, which is very normal. Quite a number of people are displaced because of climate change. You do not see it here. Probably you have heard of Aral Sea. This is a fact of life, unfortunately. Quite a number of people were displaced. But I invite you to go once to Bangladesh. This is a country I served. This is a country during the monsoon season, 1/3 of the country goes underwater. And millions of people are displaced. So why displacement becomes sources of conflict? Because displaced people have to use the resources of others. Finally, conflict is all about resources. So when they go to another place and they try to use the meager resources of people who already live in those areas, this generates conflict. And this is what we should expect in the coming years to grow. I think it's probably a bit enough of what UNHCR should do. But one word on the job of our executive committee. The executive committee of UNHCR that you will be, again, representing, you will be representing countries who are part of the executive committee of UNHCR, decides about everything when it comes to UNHCR. We have the executive committee meeting in the first week of October every year. And we present to you the work of UNHCR, what we intend to do the year after. And every one of you has the right to scrutinize the program of UNHCR country by country, location by location. If UNHCR has, let's say, 200 offices around the world, you will be having the program of all 200 offices, from the project to the program to the staffing to the administrative costs. You will have everything. And therefore, you make your own judgment. And then when you come to the discussion, you say to the High Commissioner, your program in Congo doesn't make sense, or your program in Afghanistan should be modified. This is absolutely the right of the Executive Committee to advise the High Commissioner. The Executive Committee of UNHCR is also passing resolutions advising UNHCR on current situations. You cannot change conventions, be it Convention on Refugees or Stateless Persons, but you can pass resolutions to update the level of understanding of the organization. Finally, let me say about some challenges that the United Nations face also, be it the General Assembly, be it the Executive Committee of UNHCR, or be it in UNICEF, be it in the Security Council. You all follow debates of the Security Council. Some of the major challenges are the following. Non-compliance of states themselves. There is a resolution, a state must comply with something, and the state doesn't comply. What are you going to do? I think it's extremely important to understand and to say that sometimes it happens that the United Nations is victim of its own members. You will go through the resolutions of General Assembly or the resolutions of Security Council. You know, sometimes you see that resolutions are not implemented because the country doesn't want to go ahead and comply with international decision. Alliances based on interest. It happens. It happens quite often. Someone was telling me I'm not a politician and I'm not a professor of diplomacy, but I was told that in diplomacy there is no friendship, there is just interest.